This story is called Ganzy Remembers. It was written by Mary Grace Ketner, and the illustrations are by Barbara Sparks. Sometimes grandmother and I go to see my great-grandmother in the nursing home. Grandmother calls her Mama. Mother and I say Ganzy, and so do all my aunts and uncles and cousins. The nurses call her Mrs. Heidel. When she was a little girl, everyone called her Daphne. Her eyes are gray now, and her hair is silver. When she was a little girl, she had shiny dark eyes and long brown hair with bangs. Ganzy sleeps during much of the day, but when she was Daphne, she didn't. She got up before sunrise and went out to play with the goats. They played King of the Mountain. Then she would feed Hunzy and Dooney, the twin baby lambs that Uncle George had given her. The nurse brings Ganzy her lunch, and grandmother helps her eat it. Ganzy remembers how she used to help her mother make lunch in the morning. Every day it was bacon and biscuits. Bacon and biscuits every day. She carried it to school in a bucket. Grandmother and I pushed Ganzy to the garden in her wheelchair. She remembers riding her horse, Prince, to school. They always went the same way, across Lamb Creek, around the mountain, and past Uncle Ben's house, through the big field where the bluebonnets bloom every spring. A breeze comes over the garden wall, so grandmother and I pull Ganzy's shawl around her shoulders for her. Ganzy remembers a winter morning so cold that she stopped Prince in a clearing and hopped down to build a little fire to warm herself before going on to school. "Hello, Vera. How are you today, Amos?" Ganzy remembers that her school friends used to wait for her at the beginning of the path through the woods, and they would all go the rest of the way together. One of her friends rode an old mule to school. Every day at 10 o'clock, the mule would bray, "Ee-haw, ee-haw." No one knew why. The children read and recited and ciphered. When it got close to 10 o'clock, they'd begin to listen for him. Sure enough, hee-haw, hee-haw, hee-haw. Every day, Daphne tried not to laugh. But when the mule started braying, someone would start giggling, then someone else, and then Daphne or another child, until the whole class was laughing. Ee-haw, ee-haw, ee-haw. Well, not the teacher. Daphne liked school, and she especially liked to read. Her favorite book was Caesar's Gallic Wars. I hold the door open, and grandmother pushes Ganzy back inside. Ganzy remembers when she was Daphne, riding home after school. She rode fast as lightning, fast as anything. Uncle Ben watched Daphne race Prince across the field. He telephoned her mother. "Ella," he said, "you're going to have to do something about that girl of yours. She's riding that horse too fast. She's going to get hurt one of these days." "Daphne," said her mother when she got home, "don't ride so fast. Or at least slow down when you go past Uncle Ben's." When we get back to Ganzy's room, we see that a repairman has come. Ganzy remembers when she was Daphne. Sometimes, when she got home, there would be someone she had never seen before, sitting on the front porch. Her mother always invited travelers to stay over. Once it was a man who was very sick. They nursed him back to health and taught him to walk again. Then he moved on. One time, it was the bandit, Pancho Villa. Mother and Papu didn't call him by name, but Daphne knew who he was. She had heard other travelers tell stories about him. Another time, it was a trader playing checkers with her father. Beside them on the porch, baby Fred cooed and sang and played with a doll. "That's a fine boy," said the trader. "What'll you take for him?" "Oh, about 2 bits," answered Papu. When it came time for supper, Daphne and Fred were nowhere to be found. "We wouldn't really sell your brother," said Papu, when he finally found them. He hugged Daphne closely. Then baby Fred started crying and stamping his feet, and Daphne wished the trader would offer to buy him again. The repairman likes Ganzy's stories too. He laughs and shakes his screwdriver in the air. "That's a good one," he says. Ganzy remembers that Papu fixed everything around their house. Once he needed to repair the barbed wire fence. "Daphne, run fetch my overalls for me, please," he asked. Daphne ran out to the clothesline where the overalls hung when they weren't being used. Soon she was back, but without the overalls. "Where are they?" asked Papu. Daphne didn't answer. She looked very sad. "Well, never mind. I'll get 'em myself," he said. Daphne followed Papu out to the clothesline. A sparrow had made a nest in his pocket. "Beep, beep," her babies called out. "Well, Mama Bird," said Papu, "do you think you need a home more than I need my overalls?" The Mama Bird chirped at him from the clothesline pole. "I suppose you do." We push Ganzy to the mirror. Grandmother brushes her hair, and I draw a picture for her. Ganzy remembers. In the evening, Daphne took a bath in the washtub, or bathed with her mother in the creek. When they bathed in the creek, she could practice her spelling words by writing them on the sandbar with a stick. We push Ganzy back to her bed. The repairman helps us lift her into it. Grandmother talks with him a minute, and Ganzy talks to me. She remembers. If travelers were camping in the field for the night, Daphne would sit at the campfire and listen to the grown-ups talk about what had been happening in their home counties. Each traveler had a tale to tell. If Aunt Lucy were visiting, she read Daphne bedtime stories that she wrote herself. Aunt Lucy's stories were good for putting people to sleep. Now Ganzy doesn't need bedtime stories to go to sleep. We whisper goodbye and tiptoe out. We walk quietly down the hall to the door. "Ganzy remembers lots of interesting things, doesn't she, Grandmother?" I say as we walk down the steps. "Oh, yes," says my grandmother, "and some of them really happened." This story was written by Mary Grace Ketner, who lives in San Antonio, Texas, and is a former middle school and high school teacher who does important work with her faith community and is a very active artist, known all throughout Texas and the rest of the country as well. Barbara Sparks, the illustrator, is someone who's become famous also as a photographer. She's done work especially in Colorado, her home state, but also photographs taken all around the world. And that's the end of the story about a girl visiting her great-grandmother. Ganzy Remembers by Mary Grace Ketner with illustrations by Barbara Sparks.